The Hope of the Gospel by George MacDonald. Chapter 3. Jesus in the World. Part 1. Son, why hast thou thus dealt with us? Behold, thy father and I have sought thee, sorrowing. And he said unto them, How is it that ye sought me? Wist ye not that I must be about my father's business? And they understood not the saying which he spake unto them. Luke, chapter 2, verses 48 to 50. Was that his saying? Why did they not understand it? Do we understand it? What did his saying mean? The Greek is not absolutely clear. Whether the Syriac words he used were more precise, who in this world can tell? But had we heard his very words, we too, with his father and mother, would have failed to understand them. Must we fail still? It will show at once where our initial difficulty lies if I give the latter half of the saying as presented in the Revised English version. Its departure from the authorized reveals the point of obscurity. Wist ye not that I must be in my father's house? His parents had his exact words, yet did not understand. We have not his exact words, and are in doubt as to what the Greek translation of them means. If the authorized translation be true to the intent of the Greek, and therefore to that of the Syriac, how could his parents, knowing him as they did, from all that had been spoken before concerning him, from all they had seen in him, from the ponderings in Mary's own heart, and from the precious thoughts she and Joseph cherished concerning him, have failed to understand him when he said that, wherever he was, he must be about his father's business? On the other hand, supposing them to know and feel that he must be about his father's business, would that have been reason sufficient, in view of the degree of spiritual development to which they had attained, for the Lord's expecting them not to be anxious about him when they had lost him? Thousands on thousands who trust God for their friends in things spiritual do not trust him for them in regard of their mere health or material well-being. His parents knew how prophets had always been treated in the land, or, if they did not think in that direction, there were many dangers to which a boy like him would seem exposed, to rouse an anxiety that could be met only by a faith equal to saying, Whatever has happened to him, death itself, it can be no evil to one who is about his father's business. And such a faith, I think, the Lord could not yet have expected of them. That what the world counts misfortune might befall him on his father's business would have been recognized by him, I think, as reason for their parental anxiety, so long as they had not learned God, that he is what he is, the thing the Lord had come to teach his father's men and women. His words seem rather to imply that there was no need to be anxious about his personal safety. Fear of some accident to him seems to have been the cause of their trouble, and he did not mean, I think, that they ought not to mind if he died doing his father's will, but that he was in no danger as regarded accident or misfortune. This will appear more plainly as we proceed. So much for the authorized version. Let us now take the translation given us by the revisers. Wist ye not that I must be in my father's house? Are they authorized in translating the Greek thus? I know no justification for it, but am not learned enough to say they have none. That the Syriac has it so is of little weight, seeing it is no original Syriac, but retranslation. If he did say, my father's house, could he have meant the temple, and his parents not have known what he meant? And why should he have taken it for granted they would know, or judge that they ought to have known, that he was there? So little did the temple suggest itself to them, that either it was the last place in which they sought him, or they had been there before, and had not found him. If he meant that they might have known this without being told, why was it that, even when he set the thing before them, they did not understand him? I do not believe he meant the temple. I do not think he said or meant, in my Father's house. What, then, makes those who give us this translation prefer it to the phrase in the Authorized Version, about my Father's business? One or other of two causes, most likely both together: an ecclesiastical fancy, and the mere fact that he was found in the temple. A mind ecclesiastical will presume the temple the fittest, therefore most likely place for the Son of God to betake himself to. But such a mind would not be the first to reflect that the temple was a place where the Father was worshipped, neither in spirit nor in truth, a place built by one of the vilest rulers of this world, less fit than many another spot for the special presence of him of whom the prophet bears witness. Thus saith the high and lofty one that inhabiteth eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place, with him also that is of a contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. Jesus himself, with the same breath in which once he called it his Father's house, called it a den of thieves. His expulsion from it of the buyers and sellers was the first waft of the fan with which he was come to purge his Father's dominions. Nothing could ever cleanse that house. His fanning rose to a tempest, and swept it out of his Father's world. For the second possible cause of the change from business to house, the mere fact that he was found in the temple can hardly be a reason for his expecting his parents to know that he was there, and if it witnessed to some way of thought or habit of his with which they were acquainted, it is, I repeat, difficult to see why the parents should fail to perceive what the interpreters have found so easily. But the parents looked for a larger meaning in the words of such a son, whose meaning, at the same time, was too large for them to find. When, according to the Greek, the Lord, on the occasion already alluded to, says, my Father's house, he says it plainly. He uses the word house. Here he does not. Let us see what lies in the Greek to guide us to the thought in the mind of the Lord when he thus reasoned with the apprehensions of his father and mother. The Greek, taken literally, says, wist ye not that I must be in the blank of my Father? The Authorized Version supplies business, the Revised house. There is no noun in the Greek, and the article the is in the plural. To translate it as literally as it can be translated, making of it an English sentence, the saying stands, wist ye not that I must be in the things of my Father? The plural article implies the English things, and the question is then, what things does he mean? The word might mean affairs or business, but why the plural article should be contracted to mean house, I do not know. In a great wide sense, no doubt, the word house might be used, as I am about to show, but surely not as meaning the temple. He was arguing for a confidence in God on the part of his parents, not for a knowledge of his whereabout. The same thing that made them anxious concerning him prevented them from understanding his words, lack, namely, of faith in the Father. This, the one thing he came into the world to teach men, those words were meant to teach his parents. They are spirit and life, involving the one principle by which men shall live. They hold the same core as his words to his disciples in the storm. O ye of little faith! Let us look more closely at them. Why did you look for me? Did you not know that I must be among my Father's things? What are we to understand by my Father's things? The translation given in the authorized version is, I think, as to the words themselves, a thoroughly justifiable one. I must be about my Father's business, or my Father's affairs. I refuse it for no other reason than that it does not fit the logic of the narrative, as does the word things, which besides opens to us a door of large and joyous prospect. Of course he was about his Father's business, and they might know it and yet be anxious about him, not having a perfect faith in that Father. But as I have said already, it was not anxiety as to what might befall him because of doing the will of the Father. He might well seem to them as yet too young for danger from that source. It was but the vague perils of life beyond their sight that appalled them. Theirs was just the uneasiness that possesses every parent whose child is missing. If they, like him, had trusted in their Father, they would have known what their son now meant when he said that he was in the midst of his Father's things, namely, that the very things from which they dreaded evil accident were his own home surroundings, that he was not doing the Father's business in a foreign country, but in the Father's own house. Understood as meaning the world or the universe, the phrase, my Father's house, would be a better translation than the authorized. Understood as meaning the poor, miserable, God-forsaken temple, no more the house of God than a dead body is the house of a man, it is immeasurably inferior. It seems to me, I say, that the Lord meant to remind them, or rather, to make them feel, for they had not yet learned the fact, that he was never away from home, could not be lost as they had thought him, that he was in his Father's house all the time, where no hurt could come to him. The things about him were the furniture and utensils of his home. He knew them all, and how to use them. I must be among my Father's belongings. The world was his home, because his Father's house. He was not a stranger, who did not know his way about in it. He was no lost child, but with his Father all the time. Here we find one main thing wherein the Lord differs from us. We are not at home in this great universe, our Father's house. We ought to be, and one day we shall be, but we are not yet. This reveals Jesus more than man by revealing him more man than we. We are not complete men. We are not anything near it, and are therefore out of harmony, more or less, with everything in the house of our birth and habitation. Always struggling to make our home in the world, we have not yet succeeded. We are not at home in it, because we are not at home with the Lord of the house, the Father of the family, not one with our elder brother, who is his right hand. It is only the son, the daughter, that abideth ever in the house. When we are true children, if not the world, then the universe will be our home, felt and known as such, the house we are satisfied with, and would not change. Hence, until then, the hard struggle, the constant strife we hold with nature, as we call the things of our Father, a strife invaluable for our development, at the same time manifesting us not yet men enough to be lords of the house built for us to live in. We cannot govern or command it, as did the Lord, because we are not at one with his Father, therefore neither in harmony with his things, nor rulers over them. Our best power in regard to them is but to find out wonderful facts concerning them and their relations, and turn these facts to our uses on systems of our own. For we discover what we seem to discover by working inward from without, while he works outward from within, and we shall never understand the world until we see it in the direction in which he works, making it, namely, from within outward. This, of course, we cannot do until we are one with him. In the meantime, so much are both we and his things his, that we can err concerning them only as he has made it possible for us to err. We can only wander in the direction of the truth, if but to find that we can find nothing. End of chapter 3, part 1. Part 2. Think for a moment how Jesus was at home among the things of his Father. It seems to me, I repeat, a spiritless explanation of his words, that the temple was the place where naturally he was at home. Does he make the least lamentation over the temple? It is Jerusalem he weeps over, the men of Jerusalem, the killers, the stoners. What was his place of prayer? Not the temple, but the mountaintop. Where does he find symbols whereby to speak of what goes on in the mind and before the face of his Father in heaven? Not in the temple, not in its rites, not on its altars, not in its holy of holies. He finds them in the world and its lovely, lowly facts, on the roadside, in the field, in the vineyard, in the garden, in the house, in the family, and the commonest of its affairs. The lighting of the lamp, the leavening of the meal, the neighbour's borrowing, the losing of the coin, the straying of the sheep. Even in the unlovely facts also of the world which he turns to holy use, such as the unjust judge, the false steward, the faithless labourers, he ignores the temple. See how he drives the devils from the souls and bodies of men, as we the wolves from our sheepfolds. How before him the diseases, scaly and spotted, hurry and flee. The world has for him no chamber of terror. He walks to the door of the sepulchre, the sealed cellar of his Father's house, and calls forth its 4 days dead. He rebukes the mourners. He stays the funeral, and gives back the departed children to their parents' arms. The roughest of its servants do not make him wince. None of them are so arrogant as to disobey his word. He falls asleep in the midst of the storm that threatens to swallow his boat. Hear how, on that same occasion, he rebukes his disciples. The children to tremble at a gust of wind in the house? God's little ones afraid of a storm? Hear him tell the watery floor to be still, and no longer toss his brothers. See the watery floor obey him and grow still. See how the wandering creatures under it come at his call. See him leave his mountain closet and go walking over its heaving surface to the help of his men of little faith. See how the world's water turns to wine, how its bread grows more bread at his word. See how he goes from the house for a while, and, returning with fresh power, takes what shape he pleases, walks through its closed doors, and goes up and down its invisible stairs. All his life he was among his Father's things, either in heaven or in the world. Not then only when they found him in the temple at Jerusalem. He is still among his Father's things, everywhere about in the world, everywhere throughout the wide universe. Whatever he laid aside to come to us, to whatever limitations, for our sake, he stooped his regal head, he dealt with the things about him in such lordly, childlike manner as made it clear they were not strange to him, but the things of his Father. He claimed none of them as his own, would not have had one of them his except through his Father. Only as his Father's could he enjoy them, only as coming forth from the Father, and full of the Father's thought and nature, had they to him any existence. That the things were his Father's made them precious things to him. He had no care for having as men count having. All his having was in the Father. I wonder if he ever put anything in his pocket. I doubt if he had one. Did he ever say, "This is mine, not yours"? Did he not say, "All things are mine, therefore they are yours"? Oh, for his liberty among the things of the Father! Only by knowing them, the things of our Father, can we escape enslaving ourselves to them. Through the false, the infernal idea of having, of possessing them, we make them our tyrants, make the relation between them and us an evil thing. The world was a blessed place to Jesus, because everything in it was his Father's. What pain must it not have been to him to see his brothers so vilely misuse the Father's house, by grasping, each for himself, at the family things? If the knowledge that a spot in the landscape retains in it some pollution suffices to disturb our pleasure in the whole, how must it not have been with him, how must it not be with him now, in regard to the disfigurements and defilements caused by the greed of men, by their haste to be rich in his Father's lovely house? Whoever is able to understand Wordsworth or Henry Vaughan, when either speaks of the glorious insights of his childhood, will be able to imagine a little how Jesus must, in his eternal childhood, regard the world. Hear what Wordsworth says: "Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar. Not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come, from God who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy. But he beholds the light, and whence it flows, he sees it in his joy. The youth who daily farther from the east must travel, still is nature's priest, and by the vision splendid is on his way attended. At length the man perceives it die away, and fade into the light of common day." Hear what Henry Vaughan says: "Happy those early days when I shined in my angel infancy, before I understood this place appointed for my second race, or taught my soul to fancy aught but a white celestial thought, when yet I had not walked above a mile or two from my first love, and looking back at that short space, could see a glimpse of his bright face, when on some gilded cloud or flower my gazing soul would dwell an hour, and in those weaker glories spy some shadows of eternity, before I taught my tongue to wound my conscience with a sinful sound, or had the black art to dispense a several sin to every sense, but felt through all this fleshly dress bright shoots of everlastingness. Oh, how I long to travel back, and tread again that ancient track, that I might once more reach that plain where first I left my glorious train, from whence the enlightened spirit sees that shady city of palm trees." Whoever has thus gazed on flower or cloud, whoever can recall poorest memory of the trail of glory that hung about his childhood, must have some faint idea how his Father's house and the things in it always looked, and must still look to the Lord. With him there is no fading into the light of common day. He has never lost his childhood, the very essence of childhood being nearness to the Father and the outgoing of his creative love. Whence, with that insight of his eternal childhood, of which the insight of the little ones here is a fainter repetition, he must see everything as the Father means it. The child sees things as the Father means him to see them, as he thought of them when he uttered them. For God is not only the Father of the child, but of the childhood that constitutes him a child. Therefore the childness is of the divine nature. The child may not indeed be capable of looking into the Father's method, but he can in a measure understand his work, has therefore free entrance to his study and workshop both, and is welcome to find out what he can, with fullest liberty to ask him questions. There are men too who, at their best, see in their lower measure things as they are, as God sees them always. Jesus saw things just as his Father saw them in his creative imagination, when willing them out to the eyes of his children. But if he could always see the things of his Father, even as some men and more children see them at times, he might well feel almost at home among them. He could not cease to admire, cease to love them. I say love because the life in them, the presence of the Creative One, would ever be plain to him. In the perfect, would familiarity ever destroy wonder at things essentially wonderful because essentially divine? To cease to wonder is to fall plumb down from the childlike to the commonplace, the most undivine of all moods intellectual. Our nature can never be at home among things that are not wonderful to us. Could we see things always as we have sometimes seen them, and as one day we must always see them, only far better, should we ever know dullness? Greatly as we might enjoy all forms of art, much as we might learn through the eyes and thoughts of other men, should we fly to these for deliverance from ennui, from any haunting discomfort? Should we not just open our own child eyes, look upon the things themselves, and be consoled? Jesus, then, would have his parents understand that he was in his Father's world, among his Father's things, where was nothing to hurt him. He knew them all, was in the secret of them all, could use and order them as did his Father. To this same, I think, all we humans are destined to rise. Though so many of us now are ignorant what kind of home we need, what a home we are capable of having, we too shall inherit the earth with the Son eternal, doing with it as we would, willing with the will of the Father. To such a home as we now inhabit, only perfected and perfectly beheld, we are travelling, never to reach it save by the obedience that makes us the children, therefore the heirs of God. And, thank God, there the Father does not die that the children may inherit, for, bliss of heaven, we inherit with the Father. All the dangers of Jesus came from the priests and the learned in the traditional law, whom his parents had not yet begun to fear on his behalf. They feared the dangers of the rugged way, the thieves and the robbers of the hill road. For the scribes and the Pharisees, the priests and the rulers, they would be the first to acknowledge their Messiah, their King. Little they imagined, when they found him where he ought to have been safest, had it been indeed his Father's house, that there he sat amid lions, the great doctors of the temple. He could rule all the things in his Father's house, but not the men of religion, the men of the temple, who called his Father their Father. True, he might have compelled them with a word, withered them by a glance, with a finger touch made them grovel at his feet. But such supremacy over his brothers the Lord of life despised. He must rule them as his Father ruled himself. He would have them know themselves of the same family with himself, have them at home among the things of God, caring for the things he cared for, loving and hating as he and his Father loved and hated, ruling themselves by the essential laws of being. Because they would not be such, he let them do to him as they would, that he might get at their hearts by some unknown, unguarded door in their diviner part. I will be God among you. I will be myself to you. You will not have me? Then do to me as you will. The created shall have power over him through whom they were created, that they may be compelled to know him and his Father. They shall look on him whom they have pierced. His parents found him in the temple. They never really found him until he entered the true temple, their own adoring hearts. The temple that knows not its builder is no temple. In it dwells no divinity. But at length he comes to his own, and his own receive him. Comes to them in the might of his mission to preach good tidings to the poor, to heal the broken-hearted, to preach deliverance and sight and liberty, and the Lord's own good time. End of chapter 3, part 2.